What's up guys, Rogue9 here, and hooray and huzzah, good news everyone! With the launch of Operation Shadow Legacy and the addition of Sam Zero Fisher to the game, we finally have a brand new and shiny gun to analyze. Remember the time when every season offered us 4 or 5 new guns to explore? Those were the days, but beggars can't be choosers, one new gun is better than nothing, and in today's video I will be comparing Sam's iconic SC3000K with his alternative primary, the trusty MP7. What are their individual strengths and weaknesses, how should you set up each gun with attachments, and which one will be the better choice for you? Let's go and find out. As always, we kick things off with a general overview of the most important stats of the two guns, and on average, the distribution of green and red stats is pretty even. That's a great start, and things should get quite interesting. Now let's break these stats out into the overarching topics of firepower and usability, and let's go into a bit more detail. As a bullpup rifle chambered in 300 blackout, the SC3000's damage per shot is 40 to 45% more powerful than the MP7 at all ranges, and its drop-off basically only just starts where the MP7's is already bottomed out. Interesting side note here is that even though the SC's close range damage is only about 1.8 points above the average for the rifle class, so essentially good but not great, its long range damage is joint second, only beaten by Blackbeard's lousy Mark 17 CQB of all guns. The takeaway here is that even though the SC3000 is quite powerful at short to medium range, it is unusually capable at longer ranges. By contrast, the MP7's long range damage compared to the SMG class is actually below average, and we will see the effects of this in a little while. And while the MP7 does have a fire rate advantage, it's not actually that huge, and therefore the resulting damage per second output for the SC3000 is still between a quarter and a third higher depending on range. 1 point to the SC3000, but let's dig a little deeper. How do things compare once we drill down to the number of shots to down or kill and the time to down or kill? As is to be expected, before damage drop-off, the rifle's greater damage per shot means that it will need 1 and sometimes even 2 less shots to down or kill a defender, and despite the higher fire rate of the MP7, it still results in a considerably faster takedown time for the SC. Given the SC3000's unusually high long-range damage and the later drop-off range compared to the SMG class, the divide between the two guns becomes even more extreme once we move on to medium to long range. Here the MP7 will need up to 4 shots more depending on armor type and hit location on target, and this leads to massive takedown time disadvantages of up to 200 milliseconds. The fact is that when it comes to pure combat power, there is absolutely no debate here. In general, the MP7 is arguably one of the best primary SMGs in the game. It has an above average fire rate and the highest DPS of all, but against the SC3000K, it just cannot compete because this awesome new rifle with its above average damage and fire rate compared to the rest of the rifle class is simply better. In fact, the DPS of the SC3000 is only beaten by Fuse and Ace's AK-12, Jackal's C7E and Twitch's F2, and the C7E and the F2 only just edge out in front, to be fair. So that's it in terms of combat effectiveness. The SC3000K is always going to be the better choice when compared to the MP7, but there is still a chance for the MP7 to redeem itself when it comes to handling and ease of use. This video is brought to you by longtime supporters of the channel, Ridge Wallet. I've completed the hat trick. Not only have I now used the aluminium and the titanium versions, but over the last couple of months I've been using their carbon fiber model, which is the lightest one of all, and I'm really happy with it. If you're looking to upgrade your bulky old wallet, check out the Ridge Wallet at ridge.com/rogue9, that's ridge.com/rogue9, and if you use the code rogue9 at checkout, you can get a 10% discount and free worldwide shipping. Right off the bat, the MP7 gets a 5-bullet capacity advantage, and while 25 plus 1 is still very decent for the SC3000, there may always be the odd situation where those 5 bullets can mean the difference between winning and losing a gunfight. When it comes to reload times, the new rifle is 100 milliseconds slower than the average compared to the rest of the rifle class, and that makes it around 20% slower than the MP7, which in turn, and by sheer coincidence, just happens to be 100 milliseconds faster than the SMG class average. So, less ammo means more frequent reloads for the SC3000, and these will be much slower compared to the MP7. If you're the type of Siege player who finds themselves routinely engaging more than one opponent and chewing through 30-round mags like there's no tomorrow, then maybe this might actually be a bit of a reason to favor the MP7 over the SC. But for most players, the greater combat power of the new rifle will still be the far more important factor here. But of course, there are more handling factors to consider. The aim-down sight times for both weapons are the standard 400 milliseconds for rifles and 300 milliseconds for SMGs, which means that out of the box the MP7 will allow for quicker target acquisition, but whereas the MP7 has its integral grip set to the vertical position by default, we will have the options of choosing either the vertical or angled grip for the SC3000. Check out how cool this gun has been modeled. Honestly, whoever built the 3D models for this gun, hats off, that's a great job. I love the attention to detail that has gone into making this gun special. And if you pick the angled grip, you of course get the 40% aim down sight speed bonus, which in turn gives you an outstanding ADS time of 240 milliseconds and ends up giving you an actual advantage over the MP7. The question is the recoil of this rifle manageable if you forego the vertical grip? Let's get to that when we discuss recoil in just a second. Before then, let's compare the hip-fire spreads, and the simple summary is that compared to all of the guns I've tested in the past, the MP7 is really not great. It's not terrible, but definitely not good either. The SC3000 on the other hand is pretty much one of the best ever, right up there with the AK-12 and Nomad and Yana's ARX200, and so it is a lot better than the MP7. Now, as ever, in general, hip firing is a really bad idea in Rainbow Six Siege, so the actual effective value of this advantage for the SC is not a huge deal, but as I've explained in the past as well, having a tighter hipfire spread does also mean that your gun will achieve higher accuracy just that little bit quicker when aiming in, so there's that. And finally, the last piece of the handling and usability puzzle, recoil. Looking at the in-game recoil charts gives us our first indication that out of the box, recoil for both guns is pretty similar, but the added modularity of the SC3000 can end up giving it the edge over the SMG. Moving on to the right in the charts, we first have both guns with the muzzle brake, then the flash hider, except that the SC3000 also gets to use the vertical grip, which reduces vertical recoil by a further 25%, making the rifle quite a bit more controllable. I also added the vertical grip and suppressor combo in for the SC3000, and even without the benefit of a recoil controlling muzzle device, the rifle stays very competitive compared to the SMG. But of course, the first 5 shots of a burst only tell half the story, and so I ran some practical tests for myself. For instance, the in-game patterns did not tell us at all that the MP7 does have a tendency to veer off to the left, because this happens a bit later in the burst. Looking at the resulting patterns of my tests, I would say that the compensator is not a great choice due to the large first shot recoil, and while the muzzle brake does a great job at countering this, it offers no advantage in terms of the random spread throughout the burst. So my recommendation would be to use the flash hider, since it offers the best of both worlds, sufficient first shot vertical recoil reduction and still a bit of an advantage throughout the rest of the burst. Moving on to the SC3000, and I have to say that the recoil in the gun is really pretty decent. Even without attachments, it has a nice tight cone that swings to the right consistently throughout the burst. Once you attach the vertical grip, the muzzle climb becomes very manageable, and in terms of the muzzle attachments, I would again opt for the flash hider for the same reasons mentioned earlier, and if you go for that combination, you're going to have a significant controllability advantage over the MP7. So that's settled. If you want easy handling, definitely choose the SC3000 and slap on a vertical grip and flash hider. But are there any other viable attachment combos that might make this gun fit a different playstyle a bit better? Specifically, what I'm referring to are of course the suppressor and the extended barrel. These are quite quick to summarize. The extended barrel on the SC3000 is in fact a buffed version when compared to the extended barrel all other guns get. Not only does it raise the minimum damage at max range, which is 35 meters in the case of assault rifles, but it also actually extends the damage drop-off range to 40 meters, which is the distance normally reserved for the DMRs and LMGs. I don't know whether this inconsistency is an oversight or a purposeful buff, but as of right now, it is only Sam who gets this additional little benefit. It could actually be interesting to extend this buff out to all other characters in the game. But that aside, the one big downfall of this attachment remains. It only adds a benefit at pretty long ranges, and with the average combat distance in Rainbow Six Siege being around 10 meters, it's almost impossible for the advantages of long-range damage to ever kick in. And for that simple reason, even the slightly better version of the extended barrel that Sam gets to play with is still basically pointless. The suppressor though is a different matter, and not just on the SC3000 but also the MP7. At the most common combat ranges, you're going to need one extra hit on half of our strike location and armor type combos. It really boils down to needing one extra shot against level 3 armors and against level 1s if they're wearing rook plates. And that shouldn't really be a surprise because, psst, here's a little secret, putting on rook plates basically turns level 1s into level 3s in terms of the damage they can soak up. But that's just a little side note. The main point here is that while needing one extra shot against level 3s at close range is not ideal, it is still in the region of being tolerable when weighed up against all of the advantage you get out of the suppressor. And oh wonder of wonders, the suppressed performance of the MP7 at shorter ranges is exactly the same. Now, just like every single other gun in Rainbow Six Siege, when you get out to those longer ranges, the suppressor is no longer ideal for Fisher. You're going to need at least 1 and even up to 2, 3 or 4 extra shots, plus you will also have more recoil to deal with because the suppressor won't help with recoil at all. And that opens up the question of, how controllable are these guns when you use the suppressor? In my tests, the SC3000 is definitely still relatively easy to handle, especially when you also use the vertical grip. The MP7 is a bit tougher to use effectively, so you will need to take that into consideration. My conclusion of all of this would be that whether you're using the SC3000 or the MP7, if you're aiming for the best possible recoil control, take the flash hider and the vertical grip if possible. At the same time though, if you think that you might benefit from being a little bit harder to locate, then the suppressor is definitely an equally viable choice, at least for the SC3000. The final point to consider in usability is the selection of available sights. This was never a huge factor in the past, but now with all of the new sight options in the game, it's worth taking into consideration. Of course, every player will have their own preferences when it comes to sight choices, and the objective measure here becomes the more choice, the better. And that's where I think once again the rifle takes another point, simply because it gets one more choice in the 2.0 scope. And when you boil down all of those factors that I include under usability, then the only things the MP7 has going for it are the slightly larger capacity and the quicker reload. In terms of target acquisition, controllability and sight selection, the SC3000K is the winner, and that leads us to a very straightforward conclusion for this video. Yes, as an SMG, the MP7 is one of the best defender weapons you could pick, but when compared against a very good assault rifle, it just cannot keep up. Lower takedown power in all situations and worse handling and usability make this little personal defense weapon the worst choice for almost every player in every conceivable situation. It's a shame that the choice for Sam is not really balanced right now, but at the same time I don't want it to be fixed. Since Bandit also uses the MP7, buffing that gun is pretty much out of the question, and so the only way to create balance would be a nerf to the SC3000, and in my personal opinion, that step would be a real shame. And that's it. Do you ever use the MP7 over the objectively superior SC3000K? If so, then why? Let me know in the comments section below, and with that, many thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next episode.